And can I add my welcome to you all to Green Templeton College. As Raphael said, one reason why it was felt appropriate that I talk particularly about climate change is because I'm leading the climate action plan for the college, which is resulting from a decision by our governing body in December to commit to become climate neutral as soon as practically possible, and then to go climate positive, and I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. But before I do, just a word or two about the college. We are the result of a merger between two postgraduate colleges, Green College and Templeton. We merged 12 years ago, and we have an academic intellectual agenda which is quite clear, in that we focus on issues relating to human welfare. Human welfare is really our mission, and social, economic, environmental well-being in the 21st century. So we have quite a wide range of disciplines, and they cover health and medical science, business and management, a broad range of social sciences, and that includes education, environmental sciences, and social policy. And in fact, we have quite a distinguished history in the environmental space, which I'll be referring to as my talk continues. There are three people who have made very significant contributions to the climate debate at global level. They include Crispin Tickell, who was formerly a warden, is still a fellow. James Lovelock, who is a fellow. He was 100 last year and published his latest book when he was 100. I'll touch upon that later. And finally, Norman Myers, who was a fellow up to his death, sadly, a few months ago. As I say, I'll come back to those shortly, but we have another connection with the climate debate going back rather further. We have, just a few metres from the observatory, we have a weather station, and at that weather station we've been taking measurements every day since November 1813. So that gives us the longest unbroken time series in the British Isles. At the time that the observatory was being built up in Ironbridge, the first major iron structured bridge was also being built. And I think there's a certain irony in Ironbridge in that it promotes itself as the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and it won't be lost on the citizens of Ironbridge. They claim that the Industrial Revolution has had a major effect across the globe, and some of those effects were clearly not foreseen or intended, and of course they've had some of the worst flooding through this last few days. But timescales are quite important in this, and if you go back 800,000 years, and we've got very reliable science to show what the concentration of carbon dioxide was through that long period, you can see that up to 1950, the concentration of CO2 hadn't exceeded about 310 parts per million. And then if you look to the end of that time series, there's a sudden leap through the industrial period of the Industrial Revolution. And 1950 was the year when we crossed the maximum in that long 800 millennia history. And the current level is about 414. But if you look just at the period of the Industrial Revolution, you can see that there's a close correlation between the concentration of CO2 and the increase in temperature through that time period. Now, I arrived on, there's no cause and effect involved in this, but I did happen to arrive on the scene just at the moment where we crossed that magic number. I thought it might be helpful in a way to talk about a life in terms of parts per million, and I thought I'd take my life as good as anyone's, because my life in just the history of human civilization is a nanosecond. In geological time, it's a micro nanosecond, and a huge amount has happened just in my lifetime. So there I am, 1 year old, 1950, 311 parts per million. Here I am, 1970. This is me in a cave in Crete with a friend. We were at 326 parts per million of carbon dioxide by then, and a rather higher number of cannabis dioxide. But I did grow up, and by 1992 I went to the Earth Summit in Rio, and flew out of Rio absolutely optimistic, because the Agenda 21 at the original Earth Summit said by the end of the 20th century we knew exactly what needed to be done to get through the maximum amount of CO2 in the atmosphere and to see it declining. Unfortunately, when I went in 2002 for a 10-year review, it was already quite clear that the words were fantastic, the actions were minimal, and it was really quite concerning. But the worst time, one of the worst years for me in this debate, was when I went back to Rio in 2012, and it was quite clear all the indicators, other than some recovery in the ozone layer, all the indicators we were concerned about 20 years before were going in the wrong direction. And so I flew out this time from Rio really quite pessimistic. So we knew that was 396 parts per million. We knew 400 parts per million was on its way in 2014 was when it happened. But there was some good news, because I actually got my free bus pass renewed in 2014 as well. So it wasn't all bad news. But it was in April that we hit, for 1 month, an average of 400 parts per million. And that's in my lifetime. And so the consequences are following through quite